Good evening, how are you? I'm doing a stand-in talk because you can hardly hear me outside, and I had some meetings today that took me into the late hours of the day. Coming back to Virginia tomorrow, hope to be back in time to walk the roads and to talk to the dirt road gang again. I thought it was exciting that Jimmy Carter got to cast his ballot in the 2024 election. The man is an institution. His contributions after he was president are comparable to John Quincy Adams' efforts after he was president. Some thought his presidency paled in comparison. I leave for history to decide what that means for Carter, but I think it's a dramatic thing that he's voted for Kamala Harris. In Georgia yesterday, and I think this is another indication about how well things are going, and forgive me if I mentioned it yesterday, but there were 300,000 voters who showed up the first day they could vote. This is before Election Day they're doing that. And we have Trump apparently feeling the pain because he runs from interviews now. He, on the one hand, says he's going to do something, then on the other hand, he backs off it and doesn't do it. So I think he's gun shy, and perhaps that's an unfortunate metaphor. But we have noticed that since he discovered his mortality, if you will, and he's tried to figure out how to deal with Kamala Harris, having been set in his ways as to how he's going to go forward, and how he's been confused. Like, for example, he acted at a rally in Pennsylvania like he was the DJ instead of not Donald J. Trump running for president. It's fair to say that Trump is losing it, I think. Lost it, even better. Kamala Harris said that he appeared, and this is her quote, lost, confused, and frozen. That's a very interesting, that's a difficult failure for a person who has to be able to think on their feet, to have their synapses charging, not fused as one when dealt with difficult issues that he has to combat and deal with as a problem. And some of these problems are unsolvable, and you need a person that doesn't fail at the critical moments. Now, we know that Kamala had a rally today, and I think this is another important point. She announced that there were 200 Republicans in Pennsylvania who are putting country over party. That is, they're supporting Kamala, a Democrat, when they're a Republican. It goes back to Reagan and the presidents in between, and even those who had worked for Trump are part of this coalition. And we can expect, and we shouldn't expect anything less, that once we clear the garbage out, and it'll be good riddance when Trump is gone, then we can get back to the kind of traditional discussion, even intense discussion of the issues that matter to the nation, instead of worrying about a challenge to our nation as a democracy and a republic. Existential is another way of thinking about it. That is to say, to be or not to be. And for this nation, to be or not to be, that question is, are we going to continue as a democracy and a republic, or are we going to allow this addled brain of Trump to cast us into some sort of terrible oligarchy or dictatorship, as he suggested is what he wants? It's interesting, there are other signs that you can sort of feel. I've described this before, like you're swimming or something like that, you're surfing, and you can feel the tug of the water before you get up on the board and sail in. And don't get me wrong, I've only surfed on the East Coast, but even if you do a little bit of this, you know that tug, that's time to get up. And we have a federal judge who reversed Alabama's efforts to purge 3,000 names from the rolls. And they did this close to the election because they wanted to create havoc, and that's exactly why there's a rule that such changes in voting can't be briefer than 90 days. And to do it now when we're within the 30-day period is a good example of why that's wrong. Now, there's also another indication, that is in House and Senate seats, there's money coming into those races that hadn't been apparent, and they're now becoming competitive. So there's a good chance in the House. I think we only need to get 4 seats to win control for the minority leader. So, and there's this issue, I've said this before, and I think you probably all agree with it, that Alito, with the most terrible act he could do as a judge, which is to ignore the precedent of Roe v. Wade and just change the law. And these guys are the ones who said they don't want to have judge-made law, but that's exactly what happened here. Well, these guys are way over their skis, and you have Trump on the one hand taking credit for putting the judges that eliminated Roe v. Wade by having judges who defied what they said under oath to the confirming committees when they were being considered to go to the court with the advice and consent of the Senate. And so now they're there, and what do we have? We have these issues. We have 20 states that are doing all sorts of crazy things. So we have chaos. We have Trump talking about he's the IVF candidate in vitro fertilization. And he had a meeting in Cummings, Georgia, I believe, yesterday. And what we have is we have the people realizing that there's this chaos, and that these people, that is the Trumps and their minions and so forth, are redoing the freedom that they enjoyed. That is the freedom to have dominion over their own bodies, and the freedom and the right to be let alone. And now they want to say that the states are going to give us less rather than more. So they're doing that. They're compromising IVF, and they're not going to fool anyone, especially not the women. They know what's going on. So what am I saying? What I'm saying is we have to not let this get us down. That is the final days of slugging and fighting and so forth. I feel a movement. Obviously that doesn't mean anything. We just have to live through it and see if it happens. But continue to contribute what you can. Vote if you haven't. Get someone else to vote that you think can comply and fulfill their obligation with the franchise to help Kamala Harris. If they're Republicans, tell them Republicans are now supporting her, and that they think it's critical to support her because Trump on so many levels is wrong for this nation, and that whatever the Republicans have that they can invest and give to the nation, they'll have to give it in the next election. They'll have to give it on the Hill. They'll have to do what they can do in the House and the Senate. Often in races, and I hope this doesn't happen, if you win the White House, sometimes you lose one or the other of the House or the Senate. And when we won all three, sometimes the internecine disputes cause a difficulty. So I want to apologize to you for the sound in the background, but I thought it'd be useful to offer a few comments, my observations of what's happening in the last few days. And I think I may have mentioned to you that I like to look at 538, which is the ABC polling, because I sense that they look at a lot of polls, they summarize them, they look at them, they're only snapshots, but I believe it's true that today in the national contest that Kamala Harris picked up a point lead, and I don't know if she's at 3 points over, but she's struggling to get out of the margin of error in those polls. When I say she's struggling, it's not that she can do anything about it except to perform and to do these rallies and to do these interviews. In fact, this evening, as I'm talking to you, which is there's supposed to be an interview on Fox News, and I'm sure she's going to do well. And if you saw any of her appearance at a rally in which she had these 200 Republicans who agreed to support Kamala Harris, a Democrat, and she laughed about the fact that we're together. Who would believe it? But we're together, and we believe it because Trump is so bad for the nation. I apologize for repetition, but I do think there's some cause for excitement. But we have to do the hard work. We have to be stoic. We can't let these bastards get us down. And we're going to throw this guy out of office. We're going to try him in the cases he hasn't been tried. We're going to sentence him in the case he's been sentenced. We're going to force him to pay these fines. And America's going to move on with the business of being one of the finest nations in the history of the world. So that's all I got to say. And I hope to talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.